So there's a lot going on with our timber supply. If you watched my video on our timber supply shortage and timber prices, you probably got the idea that there's a lot more going on right now with our timber shortage than just the coronavirus. The coronavirus definitely exacerbated an existing issue, but this issue is something that's been around longer than the coronavirus has, and it's something that we actually knew about going back into late 2019, and legislators already started thinking of ways to try and avert a timber shortage. But ultimately, when it comes to the fundamental reason, and if you watch that video, I get down to the fundamental reason of what's going on with our timber supply. The reality is that timber prices are going up, and they're going to stay up for the foreseeable future, which is going to impact the cost of new homes. That's also going to drive up the price of existing homes, because people aren't going to be able to afford to buy brand new, so they're going to start buying more existing homes and fixing them up. Something that I've been trying to do is prepare my family and myself for a supply glut like this in timber. And the way that you do that is you figure out ways to create your own timber. So I wanted to talk to you guys about tools that you would need during a timber supply collapse. Timber is something that we use for more than just building homes. We use it for furniture. We use it for all sorts of projects around the ranch. We're always in need of timber. We always need lumber. So on this side of this building that I'm building, I've actually designed this to be kind of a lumber working area. So over here, I'm going to have, you see these boxes on the side. Those are mounting brackets for electrical boxes. So after I put on my siding, I'll have electrical outlets here. You'll see a 2x12 up top. That's a ledger board to mount another roof coming out the side of the building. That roof is going to run out a good 12, maybe even 16 feet, I haven't decided, feet away from the bay. And then I'm going to go ahead and have kind of an open side towards the house and towards our driveway, and then block it off where it faces the road. And this will give me kind of an area, a working area, where I can work with any length of lumber, be under cover from the sun. I'll have areas under here where I can store and lock up equipment and saws. I've been looking at different products that have saw tables on wheels, so that everything is maneuverable and movable out here. And it gives me plenty of space, because I'm working in the outdoors, but I have the covered area for it. On the other side of the building, I'm going to have a staging area where I can set up lumber that I create myself to dry out. And so this building here has a lot of function to it. It's not just a workshop. It's going to be kind of a small working mill to a certain extent, a place where I can create my own lumber, build things, and have the tools and resources to do it. So when it comes to actual chainsaw mills, you can get yourself into a very basic mill like this one for $20. This is a mill that I got off of Amazon, and I mean, it's a very inexpensive mill. You just set up a 2x4 or 2x6 going across the top of the board, and you'd put your chainsaw on there and cut down into the board. So you can cut boards off of a log fairly easy with this. I've read a lot of good reviews on it. I haven't used this myself. I'll be using it in the fall. But for a basic mill, and from what I've seen this mill can do, $20 is a pretty awesome little device. So that is your basic, everybody should have one of these, a very, very basic mill. Now, my larger mill is called the Alaskan chainsaw mill. It's made by Granberg. And I love the way that this is set up. I got a chainsaw to use with this mill. When I got this set up, I specifically got this mill and the Husqvarna 460 Rancher. And this is the minimum sized chainsaw I would recommend for milling. And it's affordable because it's still kind of a consumer chainsaw. It gets a little bit into the professional range at the 460. The Rancher is designed for the individual who has a large amount of property, uses the chainsaw more often, has heavier logs and debris to remove. I also have a much smaller Husqvarna that I use for limbing and just daily use. But the Husqvarna 460 gives me access to a 24-inch blade, which is perfect for this chainsaw mill. And for most of the lumber I'm going to cut, That's all I really need. Now, when you get into some of these big oaks and stuff, it can get really tricky trying to do that with a chainsaw mill this size, but that's when you get up into the $1,000 chainsaws and much longer blades and a much more expensive mill. You don't have to have all of that. The reason why I actually got this $20 mill is to help cut some of those trees down to size for the Alaskan mill that I have here, and I'll be doing a lot of that in the fall. If you're going to get into chainsaw milling, it's important to remember that you need a ripping chain. A ripping chain is a little different than a regular chain. So your regular chainsaw chain, this is a consumer chain. This is what comes on a 460 when you buy it. You'll notice that it's got some kickback protection on it that also kind of decreases its cutting capabilities. And the reason for that is because if you're not used to handling a chainsaw that size and it starts to cut the wood, it can easily kick back on you. So these little nubs on the chains, on the links, I'm gonna call them little nubs because not everybody is a chainsaw expert, but they keep the chain from kicking back on you. Now, ripping chain, you'll notice, it is a lot more aggressive and it doesn't have those nubs. It's got a very fine point on there, and that allows the chain to cut faster, deeper, and it actually cuts smoother. I think that you'll find that these chains, although they have much larger kickback potential, do a fabulous job cutting. So it's a faster cut chain than your consumer grade chain. And I actually have a chain that's in between these two that I use on my chainsaw on a regular basis. The other thing that you're going to want, if you're going to be doing chainsaw milling, you probably want to have several ripping chains. I use a Granberg chainsaw sharpener that just slides up and down the chain. I have a video on how to use that. I prefer sharpening my chains by hand, but when you're working on a lot of projects, one of the things I've decided I'm going to go ahead and get this year is an electric chain sharpener. They're not that expensive. It's just a lot faster than doing it by hand, but it's good to start off with having the potential to do it by hand. And something like this that just guides along the bar allows you to set your angles, and it works fantastic, is probably a bare essential that you should have with your chainsaw setup. You're also going to need some wedges. Now, when it comes to milling, the plastic wedges are probably better. These are wedges that I have. These are for splitting, but I could also use them with milling because as you go along the log, it helps to be able to slide some wedges in to hold the log up, keep it off the chainsaw as you move through the log. So chainsaw mills are kind of your obvious necessity when it comes to creating your own lumber. The other thing that you're going to want to have when you're getting into milling is the proper protective wear. Wear gloves, wear eye protection, get a helmet. I like to use the Husqvarna Arborist style helmet. It's just a more comfortable fit for my head. It doesn't have a lot of bulkiness to it, and it covers everything that I need it to cover. This is the only helmet that I like to wear. It's vented, a very nice helmet. They do make different types of Arborist helmets. They make one that will protect you against electrical impact. Even a basic Husqvarna helmet isn't a bad helmet to own. All these helmets come with ways of clamping on things like headlamps and visors and ear muffs. Husqvarna makes a great helmet, but again, I prefer these Husqvarna Arborist helmets, the Arborist style. You also need a good pair of chainsaw chaps, and if you're going to be using a mill, I wouldn't skip on your chaps. These are 600 ply Husqvarna chap. They're called the Husqvarna functional chaps. I love these chaps. They're very comfortable, and again, they get the job done. They protect me. Cheap chainsaw chaps won't protect you if the chainsaw hits your leg. It'll stop it from cutting all the way through your leg, but it's going to leave a big gouge. The more expensive you can go on your chaps, the better protection you're going to have. The more ply that they have, basically as the chainsaw hits these chaps, they're designed to put a bunch of fibers into the saw blade to slow it down and stop it. So the more that you have there, the better protection you're going to have. I have been working towards also acquiring tools that I can do things by hand with. And I've always had some felling axes. The American felling and Michigan axes are great axes for taking down trees. And You can buy them fairly inexpensively at your local hardware store. This one's a Cobalt, came from Lowe's. It's gotten pretty old. It's got an old handle on there. I've got another one that came from China. I don't know, it was probably a $20 axe. I also have a small camping hatchet, which I use for delimbing. And if you get one of these, it helps to put on a new edge, because a lot of the bits on these consumer axes from your hardware stores, they don't come very sharp. So I like to reshape mine. I like to have mine coming in at about 20, 25 degrees and then cut down to the tip at the very end there. This hatchet, after taking it to a cheap bench grinder and working a file on it, is actually a pretty sharp hatchet at this point in time. So you can get by with a hatchet like this, you can get by with axes like that, but their bits aren't that great. They don't hold a great edge. You'll find that over time they're a little more frustrating than it's worth. I've been investing in a collection of Granfors Bruks axes. I have 2 right now. These axes are very expensive compared to your other axes. Where those axes are probably $20 to $30, these axes will cost you a couple $100. But the quality is superior. I've looked at a lot of different axes and knives, and I've come to the conclusion that I really like Scandinavian knives and axes. They have the best steel, they hold the best edge, they're the easiest to sharpen. When I have these sharpened up, I can shave with them. And this one's a splitting maul, and it stays pretty sharp. You'll notice that it's a little shorter than your standard splitting maul, and that's because it's the Scandinavian style. I like it. I have better control. When you're dealing with hand tools, having good hand tools takes away, 60, 70% of the effort. If I have to go out and fell a tree, I'm going to take this axe with me over one of those large felling axes. Now, I would like to have a Granfors Bruks American felling axe, but I haven't gotten there yet with my budget. Granfors Bruks makes a complete lineup of axes and hatchets for different uses, for wood carving. It's definitely a collection that I'm working towards. I would like to have just about everything in their lineup, really, because I want to get to the point where if I had to, I could work completely by hand, because we don't know what's going to happen to gasoline in the future. We don't know what's going to happen to power in the future. What would we be able to do with our hands if any of that happened? You're not going to be satisfied. You're not going to be able to do much with some of these cheaper axes and hatchets. They're great, like I said, for brush clearing. They're great for just, little projects if you need to do something fairly quickly. But my go-to axe over the hatchets, everything, is the Granfors Bruks Scandinavian forest axe. I like its size. I could use it like a hatchet. I can take down a tree, so I could fell with it. It's just a good overall axe to have. Like I said, I've been working on, that's been a goal of mine since last fall, is to really kind of work towards good, high quality hand tools. And that's where I'm kind of gravitating away from this cheap hardware store stuff into the Granfors Bruks collection. There's Halts Bruks as well. They're a little less expensive. Again, great quality axes. And believe it or not, Husqvarna makes a very nice quality axe as well. But again, they're all Swedish made. You really can't beat the quality when it comes to Swedish axes. So on the hand tool note, I would definitely suggest you get yourself some saws. This saw I got at an auction for $5. It actually came in a bucket of things for $5. And I use this frequently. I use it all the time. I use it on just about every project I'm working on. I would like to get some higher quality saws as well. But for now, as long as I have electricity and my electrical saws, this one works just fine for me. When it comes to axes and sharpening an axe, I would highly recommend that you have a sharpening file. The mill file is one of the best tools that I've ever used to sharpen an axe quickly. I can put an edge on an axe that'll take the hair off my arm with one of these files. Now, ultimately, if you're going to be getting into hand sharpening, which you should be prepared to do, a typical sharpening stone that you would buy at your local hardware store is not going to be enough to put a nice edge on an axe. In fact, I use the file more than I do my standard sharpening stone, and I use the file on pocket knives more than I do my standard sharpening file, because it just works a lot better for me. So I would definitely get yourself a mill file. a bastard file if for axes, if you can get one that that cuts in both directions on one side and then a single direction on the other side, that would probably be the best for you. I'll put a link to some of the best bastard mill files that I have found. Some of them aren't very expensive at all. If you're gonna use sharpening stones, I would definitely suggest you get a sharpening stone kit where you can go up to like the 8,000 grit. Then you could really get a nice edge on a knife, an axe, or whatever it is that you're sharpening. That's typically what they'll use for kitchen knives to get those so sharp. You definitely need something like that. If you're gonna end up working with hand tools a lot, you need to have the ability to really put an edge on them. The other thing I would recommend is a leather strap and a throff, and I'll put a link to one of the ones that I like below. And in the fall, when it gets a little cooler out, I'm gonna be doing a lot more work with the chainsaw mill and these axes and hatchets and things, so that we can, hopefully learn together a lot about making our own lumber, because the way the lumber prices are going, the way the supply of lumber is going, having the ability to create your own lumber, not only could it be a great hobby, a very fun hobby for you, but it could save you a lot of money. I mean, to get a slab of oak costs a fortune. We have oak trees down all over our property from hurricanes and stuff, and a lot of them are still usable. So to be able to cut that oak up, not only could it be another income for us, but it could be a great hobby to build things out of it. I'm really looking forward to doing that. And like I said, I've been trying to gravitate towards building up an entire stockpile of high quality hand tools for creating lumber, and those would be all sorts of different carving axes, different types of hatchets. And the collection that I've been going with is the Granfors Bruks collection, but again, you can go with Halt's Bruks. For a felling axe, the Husqvarna felling axe is a fantastic axe. And as I said, if you get a chainsaw mill, the 24-inch Alaskan chainsaw mill by Granberg. Granberg makes the best chainsaw mills. It's a fantastic mill. Definitely get yourself into a Husqvarna 460 if you can't get into some of the larger professional saws. The 460, again, it's just, you have to have the right amount of power and a long enough blade to be able to really cut into a tree and run the length of a tree. And you're just not going to do that with some of those smaller consumer saws. You've got to go a little bigger. At your typical box store, you're going to be able to find maybe the Rancher 450. Definitely go up to the 460 or higher, because you're not going to have the power that you're going to want to have when you're milling. So hopefully this video is helpful to you. I like to try and give you ideas, not just of what's going on in the markets and all the bad news of where we're headed, but I also like to give you solutions, and that's why I do some of these videos. I give them to you to give you solutions and some Amazon links to make some extra cash. I would not waste time on this stuff, because if you wait, what's going to happen is, as lumber prices continue to go up and people need a way to move forward, all of this stuff is going to become harder to find. The chainsaw mills are made out of aluminum. Aluminum and tin have been going up. So this is stuff that you should be focusing your attention on now before prices go through the roof.